Alex, good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to Greco.
Thank you.
We have a few questions for this morning interview session. And I would start, if you don't mind, with a question about yourself. I understand that you have been working as a risk manager for more than 10, 15 years probably. And you worked in multi-billion corporation in different industries, in different countries, even in different continents, as far as I know. Today you are definitely a thought leader of a new generation of risk managers. You have founded Risk Academy, you are making Risk Awareness Week. My question is, when you started as a risk manager, did you come to this profession already with ideas of database advisory, quantitative analysis, mathematical approach, or you developed during the years the professional learning from different situations, maybe some company or event influenced your development in this area?
That's a very good question. I think back in the university, and I'll try and keep it kind of brief, because I was one of 20 people to have the first ever undergraduate diploma in risk management in Australia. We were the first class of this new department, risk management, which I thought was really funny because a couple of years later, the faculty cancelled that program. So we were the guinea pigs in a failed experiment. And the faculty believed that risk management is not a profession. So that was a good start to my career. And I applied for risk management, I think just like anybody in school does. My dad was doing a PhD at the same university, and he came in and said, oh, they've got this new course, risk management. Do you want to do it? And in Australia, you kind of put order of priority, and then you just get into whatever you get in. And so risk management was a choice number 4 for me. And I knew nothing about what risk management was because it was the first ever program in the country. So that was fun. And I think I just kind of did the most out of where I ended up at university. The amazing thing was that in risk management, in Australian universities in general, the first year is all foundational subjects. So everybody does statistics, regardless of what you actually major in. And I've done so well in statistics at the time that the statistical faculty sent me a letter saying, do you want to do a second major in statistics? And I said, no, I'm a student, I don't care. I don't think about those things. And so the following year I did the second base statistics because it was one of the electives for the risk management course. And the faculty sent me another letter saying, do you want to do major in statistics? And I said, okay, fine, you got me, you convinced me. And so I ended up doing a degree in statistics, which is so fortunate because the risk management degree had virtually no math except those 2 statistical subjects. And I ended up doing like 10 extra statistical subjects. So thank God, because otherwise I would have no clue about quantitative risk analysis. And so I kind of grew up with some sort of base. And that mathematical base got wasted for the first 5 years of maybe 7 years of my career, because I was working for large consulting companies and they sold a lot of risk management. In fact, I was one of the co-authors of the global risk methodology that became, the base for COSO ERM a few years later. And there was no quantitative risk analysis, no proper quantitative risk analysis in it. And it's only when I left consulting and joined actual business, I tried to implement everything we were preaching as consultants, and it failed so miserably that it compounded in my head saying, okay, the king is naked. Something's not right. And it was the same time that Sam Savage published his book, Doug Hubbard published his book, Nassim Taleb published his book. So these 3 books kind of collectively, Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, so at least 4 books collectively kind of really flipped everything I knew about risk management. And this was many years ago. This was 2009. And I've never kind of looked back ever since. So I think that kind of what led me into the current day career in risk management, doing what I'm doing, and Risk Academy is officially now the biggest YouTube channel for non-financial risk management.
Why did you start with this Risk Awareness Week and this activity outside of your direct responsibility of a risk manager in the company?
I think this is very funny, because the biggest driver for innovation is laziness.
Yeah.
And I disliked going to the conferences and flying so much that for years, before I started Risk Awareness Week, I was looking for a virtual platform. And it's only now that we think that everybody does virtual conferences, and that's only happened because of COVID. Before COVID, there was virtually nothing, and there was only a couple of platforms on the market that were doing that, and they were extremely expensive. And as soon as I found something that was cost effective, I did it like the very second. In 2019, this was the first Risk Awareness Week 6 years ago. And that's the same with YouTube. I literally created videos disagreeing with other videos of risk managers that I saw. And one famous risk manager did like 100 videos answering all topics, like what's a risk appetite, what's a risk framework. And I disagreed with everything he was saying. So I recorded anti-ERM videos, and that now it grew into the biggest YouTube channel on the planet. I just got my silver button from YouTube for 100,000 subscribers.
Okay, great. Speaking about the Risk Managers Society, can you explain your view, what is a risk manager of a new generation? I would say that from my observation, many risk managers see the risk like a sort of a static matrix, and they base their assumptions and decisions on a sort of average indicators. And they rather work with a sort of lists of issues, or they call it risk map.
Yeah.
And I remember that in one of your videos you compared risk management with a huge puzzle which has many cells, and that you believe more in stochastic nature of risk rather than deterministic approach.
Yes.
So can you explain about this a bit? So how you can then predict the future, and how can you make your decisions today about something that is going to happen later?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a tough question, because I can probably talk for a month on just that, and I'll try and kind of unpack it in the most simplest terms. I divide risk management into two buckets, and most of the things you mentioned, they're the artifacts that you would find in the first bucket. And the first bucket, I call it risk management 1, but you can call it risk governance. It's basically creating this smoke screen perception that the company is serious about thinking about risks. And that has risk management policy framework, risk appetite statements, heat maps, risk reports, like all of the stuff that you would traditionally see, risk and control self-assessments, like a lot of regulatory risk reporting. All of that is a smoke screen to show to somebody. And that, that's fine, that's part of the game. There's an expectation from the external auditors, from the shareholders, from the regulators, that there's something like that. And they're pretty kind of specific how it should look like. The reality is that bucket has nothing to do with how organization actually makes decisions day to day. How you allocate capital, how you budget, how you plan. Do you switch from one raw material to another raw material? Do you switch from smaller trucks to larger trucks? All of these decisions are highly uncertain. And the heat map is not going to help you to decide, where you should build a plant, a chemical plant in this region or in this region. Even if you build two heat maps for each of the regions and compare them, it's not going to give you enough substance to actually base your multi-billion-dollar decision on. So for the second, I call it risk management 2, the second bucket, there are completely different techniques, completely different competencies, different deliverables. For example, you don't have risk reports in risk management 2. Rather, you make the existing deliverables risk-based. So for example, if the project management team comes in and says, we're going to finish this project in 6 months, the risk manager does his analysis and says, you are going to finish in 6 months with the probability of 5%.
Okay.
And 95% of the time, it will actually take much longer. And given the confidence interval of like 90%, you're going to finish somewhere between 5 and 12 months.
Okay.
And that's a completely different conversation. But then the daily decisions with daily risk analysis, risk assessments, different risk assessments, that's a completely different skill set, different beasts, different frequency, different, you know. We even use different software. Like it really, there's absolutely no connection between the two.
Speaking to the managers and insurance managers, we see that most of them are quite aware about quantitative analysis, and they are keen to take decisions based on data rather than intuition. But for them, this is something not built into their daily process, and it is not something that would be a strong requirement internally. As I understand, for you, quantitative analysis is something that is a sort of compulsory protocol in your company, in your department. My question is it difficult to implement this philosophy inside of corporation? Yeah. Do you need to overcome resistance from other functionalities, maybe shareholders, maybe senior management?
Basically, insurance, placement, buying, risk transfer, finding this balance between how much risk to retain versus how much risk to transfer and what's the fair price of a policy. That's kind of, these decisions can be solved with the tools from the risk management 1 bucket or with the tools from the risk management 2 bucket. Completely different tools. Yeah. So for example, nothing's stopping you from creating this beautiful heat map and sending it to the insurance company and then expecting something in return. The reality is that I think we have enough empirical evidence to suggest that we've tested both. And the first one delivers, like 5% savings. And the second one delivers 40-60% savings. Okay. That's a big difference. And going back to the question of we don't mix money with models, in 2021, our team was named best risk management team in Europe and in US for our saving, I think 13 point something million dollars in a single year. So that's saving every single year, in perpetuity. And we managed to double and triple our coverage. So we didn't save by reducing limits. That's not risk management. We didn't save by ranking up deductibles. Anybody can do that. Yeah. We saved by keeping the deductibles, tripling the limits, and reducing the rates so much that we ended up saving. We actually reduced the cost of our total insurance portfolio by 40%. Yeah. That pays for your whole risk management department for the next 10 years. That was a good presentation to the shareholders, and they really appreciated it. So bringing actual physical savings to any level of decision makers makes the sale pretty easy. Yeah. The second part of the question on how do you convince is a little bit difficult for me, because I've made, ever since I believe I've earned a little name in the risk profession. Okay. I've been very specific about who I want to work with. Okay. And so the last companies I've been working with, the shareholder was math PhD, and the CFO was math genius. At the moment, I'm working with the CEO who literally wrote a book on stochastic decision making, or risk-based decision making, I should say. And so it's challenging for me to grasp the concept of somebody not understanding the significance of what we're doing.
Keeping in mind that Greco will celebrate 100-year anniversary next year, I would say that we are now entering sort of a new century on our way to the transformation from an insurance broker to risk-based advisor. How do you see in future the relationship between the client and the broker that is striving to be the risk advisor first and foremost, and then be the insurance intermediary. Which tasks would you delegate to us, for example, or which ones would you handle in-house?
So this is. I mean, first of all, I'm very excited that you're starting on this journey, and I think you're very strategic in that, because a lot of the other brokers have kind of been doing that for a long time, but they seem to be making the wrong turn at some stage. And because I've seen the models, I've seen the results that they're delivering, and for some reason the conclusions are completely wrong. Mm-hmm. And so, while the math is correct, there seems to be some sort of disconnect with the business. So I'm glad you waited it out a little bit, and now you have the opportunity to do something, learning on all the mistakes that the rest of them made. And I think this is huge, because over the last 5 years, I had to almost force brokers to help me achieve my kind of quantitative vision. And not everybody was willing to. So I had to, stop working with some of the brokers, and then I was limited to quite a few players on the market who are even able to speak the quantitative language, because in my mind, risk transfer is a very mathematical decision to decide how much risk to retain, how much risk to sell to the insurance company, and what's the fair price, and how does that correlate with the shareholders' appetite for risk transfer and the company ability to retain risk, the actual balance sheet. All of these decisions are calculatable. There's when I'm asking how much limit should we set on this, this is a calculatable decision. How much deductible should we set on this policy? That's a calculatable decision. What are the different terms and conditions? That is partially calculatable as well. So there are so many opportunities to have these conversations with the broker, and at the moment, to this day, when I ask these questions, 9 out of 10, I don't get the answer back. So it's a one-way conversation, and then I have to go through okay, this is how we're going to calculate it. Please give me at least the raw data so I can do the calculation myself. End up, it kind of pays off, because we end up saving a lot of money, and so I don't mind, and I don't have trouble justifying having a math PhD on my team. But if this was outsourced and this was done for me as part of the brokerage fee that I pay to the broker, I mean, that will completely change my life, because it will save me a lot of time, and it will, I think, just escalate is not the right word, but reposition the broker from a secretarial task of I'm forwarding messages from the client to the underwriter and from the underwriter to the client. This is really kind of a relationship secretarial task. And then sometimes you don't even bring me, not you, but sometimes the broker doesn't even bring me the world-class wording. They're literally just forwarding me the wording from the insurance company, which is the last thing I want to receive. But from that kind of secretarial task to an actual analytical deep insight, and then I will start looking at the broker in a different light, not who has the relationships, because all brokers have relationships. I will start looking at the broker in the sense of, okay, this company is specializing in a particular type of insurance in a particular market, and therefore they have 10 clients with 5 years of statistics. That's a unique competitive advantage that other companies don't have, because if they never worked in mining in a particular state in Brazil, then it will be difficult for me to justify working with them. So I think that just kind of brings the conversation to a completely different level, different questions, different expectations. I mean, maybe even different pricing, because right now I'm struggling to justify more than 5% commission on any, because that's literally back and forth document control. And if somebody were to bring me actual calculations with arguments, can you just imagine this rich conversation saying, based on our analysis of both claims and legal cases, your appropriate limit for a TPL policy shouldn't be 50, it should be 30 million. Or at least we see no evidence to justify that it should be 50 million like you had for the last 5 years. Or something else, so for example, this has happened to us for cargo, marine cargo. When we started deep diving together with the broker into our actual exposure, we discovered that we were underinsured 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So we were insuring 1 billion, and we recalculated to insure 3 billion. But while we were doing that, we actually found so much evidence to suggest that our rate was not connected to our underlying risk, and we were able to prove that to the underwriters. So we actually ended up saving money. So we tripled our coverage, but reduced the rate so much that we paid the following year less for triple the coverage with same deductibles is another fascinating conversation. Can you imagine a broker that would price in different deductible levels and then do the calculation and say increasing from 30,000 deductible to 100,000 deductible makes sense because 72% of the time you save more on the deductible reduction or on the premium reduction than extra risk that you take.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much for that, because this is exactly that direction. And now let me ask you a little bit more technical question that is connected to the insurance. So insurance doesn't always make sense. So it doesn't always make sense in a way that is being offered on the market or being underwritten. But when it does, what type of risk do you consider to be insurance worthy? What do you say, for this type of risk I will definitely have to have insurance? Whatever the limit or deductibles are, that's a different conversation, but are there any types of risks that you would deem to be insurable at all times?
I'm maybe taking this a little bit simplistically at this stage, because over the last 2 places of work, while only some insurances are legislated by law, and so they are usually kind of a must-have, so there's no discussion there. Most of the insurance are voluntary, but they're not really, because on marine cargo, if you sell on CIF, you have to get it, and then you start finding ways to package it in the most appropriate way, usually aligned with what the buyers expect, because they actually ask you for specific coverages. For example, we sell into China, and we had to have a whole conversation saying that I don't know what's the English, Class A, the Lloyd's classification for basically all risk. In China they call it differently, and we had to explain that Lloyd's Class A is literally the same as global all risk with minor nuances. So clients, and then the second thing is financing. Reality is project financing. Every bank expects constructional risk and liability and terrorism cover. On loans to the business, PDBI, kind of TPL, sometimes environmental. Most of these insurances, the big ones and the most expensive ones, are kind of expected or prescribed. And so for now, for me, that's kind of the main focus, getting the basics right, because in the previous company, when I started looking at PDBI, we found that our limit was 200 million, and then when we actually went out and did a very in-depth survey, identified risks, calculated various scenarios, our actual exposure was 1 billion. So we went from 200 million coverage to 1 billion risk, and then what you kind of realize is that insurance, and we've done this calculation on most policies, and I think this is kind of just to give you an indication of what I mean, is I think the best, even though we saved 40% and we believe we priced our policies as fairly as possible, the best we could do was overpay for the risk 3 times.
Mhm.
So there is kind of the expected losses that we retain,
Yeah.
and then there's the price of insurance. And the best we could do was to still overpay our fair price by 3%, 3x, 300%.
Yeah.
Sorry, not 3%, 3 times, which is 300%. That just means that insurance as a product is not, it's not cheap. It's you have to make a conscious decision, and you have to find justification why you would pay somebody triple to keep your risk, and you obviously do that to protect from the once-off catastrophic losses, to kind of smooth out the cash flow. Then there's the whole. I'm excluding the whole conversation about claim management and the speed of recovery, and like that's a whole separate story. But the reality is that having insurance with low deductible, given the price of insurance in general, is pretty strange. So clients that want to settle for low deductible solution on something like cargo or PDBI or liabilities, that just kind of shows that they probably haven't done the calculation to just appreciate how much better use of capital they would have if they were to retain at least some of the risk. So in my mind, I view insurance as a protection from catastrophic losses. And so answering your question, which risks are insurable, A, whatever could be catastrophic, and B, whatever insurance companies are willing to sell me at a reasonable price.
Many people speak about AI, and applying to your approach to the risk, how often do you use it now in your practical life? And where it makes sense to use it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so in the spirit of sharing and creating stuff and making risk management knowledge accessible to everybody, I don't just have the blog, the YouTube, the Risk Awareness Week. I've created the public AI pre-trained risk management chatbot that is trained in a way that even if you ask risk management one question, it attempts to give you a risk management two answer. So it says, please don't do this, do this instead, which I find hilarious because people freak out when they ask it, which they think is a basic question, like should it be a 3x3 or a 5x5 heat map? And then the chatbot goes, don't do this. It's all wrong. And then gives like a half a page explanation. But what I'm saying is that, that chatbot was just named the finalist as the best risk management technology solution by FERMA, which is the European Association of Risk Management Associations. So that's fun, and every day hundreds of people from many countries using it. And I use it and my team use it every single day. So how often we use AI? Every single day, and it, without a doubt, replaced probably 2 full-time mathematicians in my team. So a lot of quantitative analysis. Most of my Monte Carlo is done in AI today. So I have absolutely no doubt that's the future of risk management, which is quite exciting because it really lowers the bar. Previously, you have to have a risk management department or insurance department cannot survive without a full-time quant. And today, I think we've lowered the bar. Any person who is kind of curious and understands the basic of statistics and the probability management and decision science and insurance with AI can now do all the calculations necessary, which is pretty crazy. A year and a half ago, I wouldn't even think of that, but today here we are.
No question. So thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Thank you.
Thanks.